Hey guys, this is Cam. I'm sure some of you are familiar with some of my older content here on YouTube or Twitter. I used to be a much more active content creator on YouTube a few years back, but since then life has changed and so have some of my priorities. During this whole time though, for at least the last 7 years, I've been an active member of Kabam's content creator program for Contest of Champions. I've been playing contests since launch 10 years ago, and at that time I've managed to love, hate, and tolerate the game to varying degrees. Today I wanted to go over what I feel like is some of the biggest issues with the game, the community surrounding it, and what I feel like could be a solution, or at least the only thing we can do as players. And before I start, I have to mention that while the recent wave of negative feedback towards the game was the push I needed to put this video together, some of the points and the trends I'll be discussing here have been issues I've felt strongly about for years at this point. I fully understand that some of the points I'm making here might not be things you agree with, and that's okay. I acknowledge that over the last 10 years I've probably grown to become a more jaded person, and if I'm being honest here, the game has probably had a role to play in that transformation. Your time and your decision to log into the game daily is one of the core metrics to any live game. And while there can be a discussion around an increasing number of these games coming out every day, expecting to get more and more of your time, I think it's clear that the true inflation-adjusted value of your time in contest has gone down significantly over the years. More game modes, higher price ceilings on deals, more menus, objectives stored to check, just to make sure you've got everything, are all examples of this. Arena Express being locked behind the sigil is simply an example of a quality of life feature, removing unnecessary pages to click through and saving you a bit of time in this super bloated game, and even that had to be paywalled. Now, this point might be countered by saying you used to get a much smaller amount of some high value resource for your grind back in the day, and you get so much more of it now for the same grind. You just have the option to grind more and spend more time for more bonus stuff. And to me that point becomes moot once you realize that, especially as a veteran, you're not playing the game in isolation, and all of your progress is relative to what others in the game achieve. And going back to the sigil, I find it really funny that even with the new version, what used to be resources automatically sent to your stash for simply playing the game is now a chest that you have to actively think about claiming every week, potentially to, get your attention on the store page. I feel like the time I spend on the game isn't just the time I'm logged in, but also all the time I spend thinking about the game in my daily life all the time, and the mental load dedicated to remembering what weekly or daily content still need to be done and what needs to be claimed. And the game has bloated far too much for almost any of the time actively spent on it or spent thinking about it to feel truly meaningful to me some days. This has been a progressing downward spiral in the last few years especially. We have gone from having 2 large sales and gifting to having 4, sometimes 5, plus banquet, plus added unit spend deals. We have also gone from having 1 free 90-day calendar per year to multiple paid battle passes. I get the Kabam is a business argument, and having a goal of capitalizing on as much of your client base's resources by giving them the promise of bonus value makes sense. But as someone who has financial limits, like most other people do, and an income that has not tripled in the last 5 years or so, while also dealing with real-world inflation, these recent trends and deals have done nothing but to dissuade me from spending. We don't play this game in an isolated capsule. The perceived value of being able to max out a given sale event, buy out all the unit deals, or hit the final milestone is what gives the impression of getting most of your spend or grind's value worth. Spending is a competitive pillar of the game, competitive being the operative word here, and knowing the deals have been diluted to accommodate spenders who can spend 2, 3, 4 times as me and reward them with 2, 3, 4 times guaranteed value has made it really easy to pass up on spending on bigger deals. bringing my amount spent even lower than when we only had 2 sales and gifting. Now you could come in here and say that you should play the game for your own enjoyment and not care about the competition. And to that I say, I don't think the game was ever really designed to be a solo non-competitive experience. Alliance Quest, Alliance War leaderboards, the arenas, prestige, time-limited progression title lock, deals and rewards, battlegrounds, or even the simple alliance reminders of who pulled or ranked whichever champions are all deeply ingrained in the social competitive element of the game. Now, if you can play fully solo with zero regard for your relative progression, that's great, but I don't believe that way of interacting with the game was ever really intended from a design perspective, or that type of behavior was really encouraged by the game in the last 10 years. Going back to the theme of dilution, just how I mentioned with the deals feeling diluted given how many we have now, I cannot overexpress how incredibly unnecessary and unexciting most champs that come out feel to me. I watched a recent video by Seaton where he also touched on this point and blamed the heavy-handed balance process driven by the prevalence of battlegrounds as a competitive game mode, which needs a far tighter balance. But in my opinion, we have not had a truly memorably dominant champ since Hercules in 2021. And maybe that's a good thing. We do have a much smaller gap between the higher power level champs and the lower ones released today. Almost every champ is good or great at multiple things. But the main problem, in my opinion, is not the lack of powerful champs, but the simple fact that there are now more than 300 champs in the game, with that number increasing by around 25 every year. In my opinion, it doesn't matter if a champ comes out today with the same relative power disparity and RPG reach that Hercules had back in 2021. The game is saturated. You don't have any novel RPG problems that require a very narrow group of champs, because introducing problems like that would require the player to go through 300 plus bloated and verbose champion kits. This problem, in my opinion, is simply unfixable without drastic shrinkage of the game. And with every passing month, it becomes even more and more unfixable. I also suspect that the perceived lack of excitement and lower interest in immediately or ever acquiring these champions has been a factor in the game losing revenue from champion crystals. These used to be a huge driver, mainly funded by large spenders, pushing the game to add more and more big sales. Now, this is where I expect the most pushback from people yelling skill issues and calling me a noob, and honestly, they're correct. That's correct. But I also know that some players have been feeling the overbearing nature of these skill asks for years. They have really started to be noticeable to me relatively recently. Going to get a little bit personal here, but last couple of years have been really challenging for me and my family. So the time and the mental energy I could allocate to the game has diminished a bit. But at the same time, I felt like month over month, we had more and more new champs coming out with novel length kits, new effects, and new play patterns, many of which involved intricate combos or my personal enemy perfectly timed taps or releases. But my brain simply could no longer keep track of the abilities and perform the skill asks. I ended up in a situation where for a long stretch here, basically every champ coming out felt useless to me because I could get by with my old ones, and I simply didn't have the time or the finger dexterity to ever play the new champs to their max or near max potential. And then we were finally hit by Ares. I think doing this fight 6 times and basically not improving at all, and hearing Kabam talk about Ares being the next big boss who will be appearing in more and more content, was my wake-up call that maybe the game isn't for me anymore. Basically, the game I've been able to play and keep up with, at least on the PvE side, is no longer fun or accessible to me. It's a skill issue. It's definitely a skill issue. But the issue is also that simply my brain doesn't work like that, and neither does my body. I mentioned the challenging last few years, but I also think it's important to give myself some credit here, because in the last few years I've managed to become a much healthier, productive version of myself. So I really don't think this is just me getting old. I think this is a shift towards a much more demanding play styles, are in fact just attempts by the game to combat the bloat and saturation that I talked about earlier, but to me all it's accomplishing is alienation. Now that we're out of the controversial bit with everybody telling me to get good, here's something that we can mostly agree to. Outdated stores suck. I believe the decision to leave them outdated is either intentional or because of the lacking resources. To the developer's eyes, the game is also bloated. The economy can only grow at a certain pace for the developers to be able to keep up with it. So we end up with a budget. And so they end up leaving stores and rewards untouched for far too long in hopes of using that econ budget somewhere else. And to encourage players to play certain modes and play other ones less. But to us as players, seeing painfully outdated event quests and side quests, alliance wars, or battleground rewards just sucks. Especially since we also often feel that the budget is shifting towards paid content, which is only reinforced by how frequently we see these sales. This issue is actually one of the parts of the entire jaded, doom and gloom video that I think Kabam may be on the right track to fix with the introduction of the new Radiance currency, which I hope will consolidate enough of the game but be finite when it comes to purchase limits in the store, so the players can decide which game modes to prioritize instead of feeling like the devs have abandoned your favorite game mode. The big caveat though for Radiance to succeed, the store would need to be updated, actually kept up to date, unlike the Forgotten Mysterium, for example. I think the timing of this video and me coming out of my hole is too coincidental not to be about the recent uproar about Battlegrounds abandonment and the Nightmare Raid situation. I also wanted to take this opportunity to discuss why I feel the way I do about the game now. And I did. I do think though that this part just breaks my brain a little bit. I do have to preface this though by saying that I have personally met Kabam Crashed and before him Kabam Numbers and other folks involved in the live game decision making multiple times, and while I don't believe anybody is infallible, I do believe that they're all trying their best to satisfy us as players and also the stakeholders of the game. To me, the recent post by Crashed and also his older posts regarding Banquet from last 2 years highlighting the discrepancy between community feedback and data, basically siding with the data when it comes to design decisions, to me makes a ton of sense. I'm sure they also analyze sentiment, but factors like retention and revenue probably are the main factors here. But at the same time, hearing this from a designer is so bizarre to me. I don't think most folks who are actively engaged in the community of mcoc think they represent the majority. We don't share the sentiment and play patterns of the greater player base simply because we are engaged enough, dedicated enough, bored enough to not only play the game, but also have opinions about it that we take the time to share outside of the game. And I don't know about you, but a game, especially a live service game, having an organic community is one of the most important things I look at when trying to figure out if a game is actually worth playing or if it's being propped up by advertising fueled by predatory practices. Sometimes these days I feel like contests and some of the people involved in making it are inadvertently alienating the community by reminding them that their sentiment doesn't line up with the data. From a community perspective, I feel like the response is very easy to equate to sentiment not being valid. This is by no means limited to the recent comments by Crashed either, by the way. I think over the years, the relationship between Kabam and the socially active player base has almost always been difficult. While some of the other issues I've talked about so far could also have been a factor, and so are some personal factors and global changes, I guess, I'm fairly certain that the ongoing difficulties over the time has strained the relationship between the game as content creators and the community members enough that we now find ourselves in our current situation. The game is noticeably less popular on YouTube, and other social channels are no longer growing at the rate they once did. Having relayed a lot of this feedback already for months, if not years, directly to Kabam, I feel like working on this video for the last couple of days has cleared my mind when it comes to the game. This game has been so important to me. It has introduced me to so many incredible individuals who I'd gladly consider close friends and mentors. It was also my introductory gateway to game design. And honestly, it's also not lost on me that this game has managed to be as incredible as it's been for this long. If you look at the mobile gaming market right now, it's mostly a grim scene of half-baked pump and dumps, and I'm so grateful for what we have gotten out of contest all these years. The complaining and taking notice of the decline is, in my opinion, the biggest sign that somebody cares enough to take the time and provide feedback. If that care was replaced with a sense of apathy, I don't think the game would have survived nearly as long as it has. But at the end of the day right now, given my increased family work and responsibilities and everything going on in the world, I think I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing. Minimizing spending, ignoring the bloat to the best of my ability while still trying to somewhat keep up with content, and ultimately wishing the best for the team behind the game and the community. I hope bridges can be rebuilt and priorities realigned before it's too late.